Welcome to Algorithmic Arguments. I'm your host, the Orchestrator. Tonight, we're tackling a question that's at the forefront of every American's mind. Is cable news perpetuating polarization in the U.S.? We're here to dissect this complex issue from multiple angles, and I'm excited to introduce our diverse panel of experts. Joining me are Professor Evelyn Cross, a renowned historian with expertise in propaganda and media studies; Lin-Park, a tech visionary who's explored the intersection of technology and society; Darnell, Coach D, Washington, a community leader with insights into social dynamics; and Shorty, Malone, whose street philosophy offers a unique perspective on human nature. Over the next hour, we'll examine the role of cable news in shaping public discourse, explore potential biases, and discuss whether these networks are fueling division or simply reflecting it. Let's dive in. The conversation starts now.
I'd argue that cable news is indeed exacerbating polarization in the US, but not solely responsible for it. The 24-hour news cycle creates an environment where sensationalism and conflict drive ratings, incentivizing pundits to stake out extreme positions. This isn't a new phenomenon. Recall the partisan shouting matches on CNN during the 2000 presidential election. What's changed is the audience's expectation of instant gratification and the homogenization of viewpoints within echo chambers. Consider the proliferation of town halls and primetime specials that often devolve into screaming galleries, further entrenching divisions. The evidence suggests a symbiotic relationship between cable news and polarization, each fuels the other. We must consider this interplay when assessing the role of cable news in America's increasingly fractured discourse.
I firmly believe that cable news is exacerbating polarization in the U.S. By prioritizing ratings over nuanced discussion, networks like Fox and MSNBC create an environment where sensationalism trumps fact-based reporting. This incentivizes pundits to take extreme stances, further entrenching viewers in their existing views. The data supports this. A 2020 study found that partisan cable news channels can actually increase polarization by reinforcing pre-existing biases. We must acknowledge the role of cable news in shaping public discourse and consider reforms that promote more balanced coverage.
I firmly believe that cable news has become a significant contributor to the polarization we're witnessing in the U.S. By design, these networks prioritize sensationalism and ratings over fact-based reporting, often pitting Americans against one another for entertainment value. Take, for instance, the proliferation of opinion-driven shows masquerading as journalism. Think about how frequently we see pundits cherry-picking data to validate their preconceived narratives. This selective storytelling not only fuels misconceptions, but also erodes trust in institutions and individuals with differing viewpoints. The impact is twofold. It radicalizes like-minded audiences while demonizing opposing perspectives, effectively stifling constructive dialogue and collaboration that could help bridge our national divides.
Let me tell you something, brother. Out here on the streets, I've seen my fair share of folks stuck in their views, and cable news is feeding them like a trough. Aristotle said that humans have a tendency to flock together with those who think like them, and that's exactly what these networks are giving us, an echo chamber. They're creating ideological silos, where people only hear what they already believe. I've watched folks on my block get their news from one source, either Fox or MSNBC, and it's all they've got. They can't even imagine a different perspective, 'cause they're not being shown it. That's polarization by design, if you ask me. The profit motives driving this 24-hour cycle of outrage and affirmation. As Marcus Aurelius said, the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. Cable news is making that truth into a vicious circle.
As we pivot into our next segment on algorithmic arguments, I want to highlight Professor Cross's assertion that cable news outlets often prioritize sensationalism over fact-based reporting. Her observation about echo chambers resonated with me. The question remains, can these platforms truly facilitate nuanced discussion, or do they merely amplify divisions? Stay tuned as our panel dives deeper into this critical issue, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.
I think it's essential we acknowledge that cable news isn't just reporting on divisions. They're actively creating and exacerbating them. By catering to specific ideological leanings, these networks reinforce pre-existing biases, making it increasingly difficult for Americans to find common ground. The 24-hour cycle doesn't allow for thoughtful reflection or nuanced discussion. Instead, it demands a constant stream of provocative content that drives ratings. This environment incentivizes pundits to take extreme stances, further polarizing the discourse. I'd argue that cable news outlets have become complicit in, if not directly responsible for, America's fractured dialogue. It's time we hold these networks accountable for their role in shaping public discourse, and consider reforms that promote fact-based reporting over sensationalism. By doing so, we can begin to bridge our national divides and foster a more informed citizenry.
I agree that sensationalism on cable news exacerbates polarization, but let's not overlook how social reinforcement of ideological identities fuels this dynamic. When individuals primarily consume information from partisan channels and online communities reinforcing their views, dissenting voices are often dismissed or ridiculed. Cable news outlets capitalize on these echo chambers by catering to specific demographics and leanings, effectively stifling constructive debate. Research shows homogeneous groups become more entrenched in their views over time. We must consider this interplay between media consumption, social norms, and polarization when assessing cable news impact.
As we conclude this debate, I'd like to synthesize the key points made and reiterate my stance. It's clear that cable news prioritizes sensationalism over nuanced discussion, incentivizing pundits to stake out extreme positions for the sake of ratings. This creates an environment where conflict drives viewership, rather than fact-based reporting. While I agree with some participants that social media has also played a significant role in reinforcing ideological silos, I'd argue that cable news is indeed perpetuating polarization by amplifying and rewarding divisive rhetoric. The 24-hour news cycle didn't create our deep-seated partisan divisions, but it's exacerbating them. Ultimately, we must recognize the interplay between cable news, social media, and societal factors. However, I firmly believe that cable news bears significant responsibility for fueling America's polarized landscape.
As we conclude this discussion, I'd like to summarize my key points and reflect on what I've learned. While I agree that cable news prioritizes sensationalism over nuanced discussion, I still believe it's more of an accelerant than a primary cause of polarization. The 24-hour news cycle and social media platforms have undoubtedly contributed to the echo chambers we see today. However, I'd argue that social media has played a significantly larger role in creating and reinforcing ideological silos. That being said, I've learned from this discussion that cable news does have a profound impact on shaping public discourse. My final reflection is that we need to consider the interplay between cable news, social media, and societal factors when addressing polarization. Ultimately, I firmly believe that while cable news can exacerbate divisions, it's not the sole culprit, and we must address the broader ecosystem that's driving this issue.
As we wrap up this discussion, I want to emphasize that cable news has indeed become a significant contributor to the polarization we're witnessing in the U.S. By prioritizing sensationalism and ratings over fact-based reporting, these networks often pit Americans against one another for entertainment value. This isn't just a matter of media consumption. It's also about community and social reinforcement. The echo chambers created by cable news, where individuals are only exposed to viewpoints that align with their own, exacerbate the problem. I agree with Lin-Park that social media has played a significant role in creating ideological silos, but cable news bears responsibility for fueling these divisions. Ultimately, we must recognize the impact of cable news on our societal discourse and strive for more nuanced discussion. By doing so, we can begin to bridge the gaps between communities and foster a more informed, empathetic citizenry.
Let me tell you something, I've seen my fair share of humans huddled around a television screen, their eyes glued to whatever's feeding their outrage. Cable news isn't just reporting events, it's creating an atmosphere where folks can indulge in being right and others be wrong. Out here on the streets, people aren't worried about nuanced discussion, they want validation for what they already believe. Aristotle said something about humans having a tendency towards like-minded company. That's exactly what's happening with cable news, they're serving up ideological comfort food that keeps viewers coming back for more. This isn't just about ratings, it's about blowing air into the bubbles folks are stuck in, reinforcing divisions rather than bridging them. I think we've got enough evidence to say cable news is perpetuating polarization, and until we change how we're consuming our information, not much else will either.
As we wrap up tonight's episode of Algorithmic Arguments, let's revisit the most compelling moments from our debate on whether cable news is perpetuating polarization in the U.S. Darnell Coach D. Washington presented a scathing critique of cable news' role in amplifying divisive rhetoric, citing the echo chamber effect and the incentivization of outrage. His points were bolstered by historical precedent. We saw similar dynamics play out during the 24-hour news cycle's dawn in the 1990s. Professor Cross offered an important counterpoint, highlighting the complexity of polarization and the multifaceted nature of its causes. Still, Coach D's consistent application of evidence and his nimble responses to our panelists' challenges earned him the top score with 16 points. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. If you're as engaged as I am about these conversations, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Algorithmic Arguments, and hit that notification bell. Your support means we can keep pushing boundaries and exploring ideas that matter. Until next time, stay curious and keep the discussion going. I'll see you then.